Coast. They thought the German Shepherd had become dangerous. They were completely wrong. The sound of a 90-pound dog slamming into a toddler is something a parent never forgets. Dani hit the carpet on a Tuesday morning, and the scream that followed was the kind that moves through walls. Marco had knocked her down again. Coast. Priya Okonkwo set her coffee on the counter and crossed the kitchen in 4 steps. Marco was already backing away, ears low, watching the baby with that fixed, deliberate attention she had started to dread. Coast. Dani was 18 months old, sitting on the floor with tears running down both cheeks, arms raised toward her mother. Priya picked her up and turned to the dog. This was the 4th time this week. Coast. Priya held a master's degree in early childhood development. She had spent 6 years consulting for school districts on behavioral intervention. She understood proximity stress, protective aggression, resource competition in multi-species households. She had a framework for every piece of this. Coast. The dog had changed after Dani's last illness. He had become fixated, reactive, unpredictable near the child. She had written those exact words in a developmental context more times than she could count. Applied to other people's situations, she had never expected to be writing them about her own. Coast. Her husband Tobias came in from the backyard and looked at Dani, then at Marco sitting 3 feet away with his eyes still on the baby. What did he do? Knocked her over again. She went down hard. Tobias looked at the dog for a long moment. His jaw tightened. He had been patient for 3 weeks. He was done being patient. Coast. He has to go outside. We can't keep doing this. Priya didn't argue. She had run the same calculation. A 90-pound German Shepherd with a behavioral shift around a toddler was not a risk that responsible parents accepted. She had seen what came after. Coast. Marco went into the yard. The back door clicked shut. Dani stopped crying within minutes, which felt like proof. Priya held her on the hip and felt the particular relief of a problem contained. She had made the right call. Her training confirmed it. Tobias confirmed it. The sudden quiet confirmed it. Coast. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. From the yard, Marco did not bark. He sat at the glass door and watched the house. Coast. That night, Dani woke at 11:40. Not crying. A thin, reedy sound the kind Priya had learned to parse. The way a musician hears pitch, she gave it 2 minutes on a monitor. The sound did not change. She went to the doorway. Coast. Dani was in the crib. Eyes open, arms at her sides, making almost no noise at all. That was the wrong detail. Dani made noise about everything. She narrated her own existence. The silence was not rest. It was something else. Priya turned on the light. The color in Dani's face stopped her moving for 1 full second. Coast. She lifted her daughter from the crib, and Dani's body was warm but slack, the limpness of a child whose muscles have stopped receiving instructions. Priya called for Tobias before she finished forming the thought that something was wrong. Coast. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. The number they gave her in the driveway was 34. Normal for a toddler at rest was above 70. At 34, Dani's brain had been running on a supply that was nearly gone. Coast. At the hospital, Dr. Amara Suli, pediatric endocrinology, 14 years in practice, sat across from them in a small room with beige chairs and a window that looked at nothing. Coast. Your daughter has a congenital glucose regulation disorder. Her levels have been dropping episodically for weeks. The irritability, the crying, the distress you were observing. Those were the symptoms. Low blood sugar in a toddler presents exactly as behavioral dysregulation. Coast. Priya heard the words and felt the ground shift under something she had been certain of. The dog, Tobias, said. Dr. Sewell looked at him. Every time she started to crash, he was on top of her. Every time. We put him outside because we thought he was making it worse. Coast. Dr. Sewell was quiet for a moment. Dogs detect isoprene in exhaled breath, she said. It's a volatile compound the body produces during hypoglycemic episodes, at concentrations that register to a dog well before any visible symptom appears. Has someone been keeping the dog away from her? Priya did not answer for a long time. Coast. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Coast. She sat with the retroactive reel of it, Marco pressing his nose toward Dani's face every time she cried. Not aggression, breath detection. Marco slamming his body against the toddler, knocking her down. Not violence. Coast. Physical interruption of a child whose blood was going wrong, forcing her upright, keeping her stimulated, keeping her awake. Marco sitting at the glass door and watching the house all evening. Not an animal that had been managed, a guardian that had been locked out of the room where the emergency was building. Ghost. Another 40 minutes, Dr. Sewell said, and we would be having a very different conversation tonight. Coast. They drove home before dawn. Dani slept in her car seat, a monitor clipped to her left arm that would now track her glucose and send an alert to both their phones. Coast, Marco came around from the yard at a walk, not running. He went directly to the car seat in Tobias's arms and pressed his nose to Dani's cheek. He held it there for 2 full seconds. Then he exhaled slowly and moved to Priya's side and sat. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on the top of his head. Coast, every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Coast. Inside, Tobias put Dani in the crib. Marco walked in behind him, lay down on the floor beneath the crib rail, and put his chin on his paws. His eyes were open. The monitor on Dani's arm blinked green in the dark. Marco watched the light. He had been watching her all along. Ghost. The next story involves a dog who refused to let a mother leave the house on the morning that changed everything. And nobody understood why until 3 hours later.